Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to episode 8 of the podcast. We got a jam-filled pack episode as usual. I'll be talking about my usual college football games, the NFL games, and with a special guest this time. And I'm going to dive into a little bit about a Netflix show that I just watched called The Queen's Gambit. So stick around and find some more. Now for your quote of the week. Anger is a potent spice. A pinch wakes you up. Too much dulls your senses. What does that quote mean to me? To me, I kind of think of more of a competitive sports kind of quote, because some athletes would say anger fuels me, it drives me, it makes me want to work harder. That's true. You should use a little bit of anger to kind of keep you motivated, keep you alive. But if it gets to you too much, it starts to get to your mind, kind of psychs you out. You get too frustrated, too flustered, because there's been plenty of times I'm either, I'm at a meet or I'm playing some sort of sports with my friends and get mad if I can't play well, and it just keeps progressing, and then eventually you have to calm yourself down. So, yeah, it's okay to use anger to fuel you, but you can't use it to dull your senses, as the quote says. Just quick updates have been going on lately. I got a haircut, so that's nice. Quick fade. Phelps, my man, got me all faded up last weekend. Yep. I ordered some posters for my apartment just because, this place gets a little boring and bland. I figured some posters will make things look a little bit more festive, or not festive, but just a little less boring. I'll even have one hanging up in my set area so you get to see something I ordered. I'm sure some of you will like it. I'm sure some of you will not like it. So we'll find out. I've actually been running a little bit more. I've been trying to upgrade to 3 runs a week, just easy 25-minute runs, just kind of stay consistent and not get too carried away. So I'm on the right track there. So I mentioned that I'll be talking about a TV show that I watched called The Queen's Gambit. It's a Netflix show. And it's about an orphan girl with an extreme intuitive ability that makes her so smart that it helps her become the best chess player in the world. Through her journey, she becomes the best, but she struggles with normal adolescence because she's a teenage girl, a woman inequality because it takes place back in the 60s, and she struggles with addiction with drugs. So as I mentioned, it takes place in the 60s in a Cold War America. At that time, the U.S. was wanting to prove they're more superior to communist Russia, and that's kind of who the main villain or antagonist of the show is. It's Russian chess players, and one chess player he's the best of the best in the world, and he's Russian. The attention to detail is really great in this show. One scene in particular, so there's a scene, Beth Harmon, she is the main protagonist, the chess queen. She's dancing to a broadcast of a band performing on TV, and in between movie frames, you can see frames of subliminal messages of an advertisement. And that was very common back in the day. My parents have told me that, and it's happened previews for movies and anywhere that was broadcast on TV. So like this little things like that is just something I appreciate that's so accurate to the time period. Things that I noticed is like how fast young adults grow in that era. An event happens to Beth, I won't spoil too much, where she kind of has to take all these responsibilities as a young 18-year-old just out of nowhere because of a certain life event. And when you listen to it, it just sounds so crazy that like if it was 2020, an 18-year-old would have almost none of these responsibilities. So it just goes to show you that like how adults were kind of treated differently back then versus now. And I mentioned that the character struggles with addiction. What I noticed is it's how easy it was to get over-the-counter drugs back in the day that could severely mess up your brain and long-term effects. Like she could just write up a fake note, and others too could write up a fake note saying that they need this prescription, and then they just get it, and it just fucks them up. So it's crazy just how easy it was to get these really severe drugs back in the day. What I like most about the show was the use of color. To me, it seemed like any frame of the show, I could like screen grab it, and it could be like a picture I can hang up on my wall. It was just really beautiful and some great visuals. I like how well the story paced. It's a short series. It only has 7 episodes, but you see Beth Harmon develop as a person physically and emotionally, and the pacing just does it so well. And the show itself, The Queen's Gambit, is a book. It's a novel, and you can easily tell that in how it's divided up on this mini series. Is it's properly structured. It feels like each episode is a chapter in the story. So it's not like a story where there's a lot of cliffhangers or anything like that. And honestly, it kind of reminded me of like an anime a little bit. Because, like, all these over-the-top animes are, you got to beat the best in the world. You got to be the best of the best. And you keep going up in this journey. Because, she beats the best in the state. She beats the best in the U.S. And then she competes in the world. And I love how all the competitions are kind of like single eliminations, winner take all kind of scenarios. They're like single person tournaments against other chess players. And from a sports perspective, it kind of reminds of like individualistic sports such as track and field, golf, and boxing. It's a clear picture of how good the athlete is. You can't say a team carries this individual athlete. It's full proof of display of their greatness right there because there's no team. It's just them playing. So I thought that was kind of neat. I like the competitive nature of the game that it showed on the show. Like, I just like how passionate every single character you meet is of the sport of chess. It could be a player, it can just be a simple spectator too. And it makes me want to compete for something, not chess obviously because I'm not very great at it. And that's another thing. Like, the show kind of turns something that's kind of perceived as nerdy or lame into something very cool and sexy. Like, I would have never guessed that chess was going to be this cool going into this this show. So that was really cool. So I really recommend it. It's The Queen's Gambit. It's on Netflix. So if you have a Netflix account, you can watch it anytime. So let's go right into college football now. Some actual team sports. So a couple games I watched. The Wisconsin at Michigan game. Wisconsin won 49-11. Graham Mertz, the quarterback, threw 2 TDs, 127 yards. The Wisconsin rushers combined for 341 yards. That's 6.7 per carry. 4 of them got 65-plus yards, so great run game from them. Michigan's quarterback, Joe Milton, unfortunately had 2 interceptions and 98 yards. And their running back, Zach Carbonet, got 21 rushing yards. Just kind of briefly what I saw, first half was just complete dominance by Wisconsin. It was 28-0 at halftime, I believe. And their run game was really hot, as I mentioned. Joe Milton, he had a very bad play where he was just trying to overextend it to see if he can make something out of it. And it just wasn't working, so he just threw it away. Michigan started to kind of catch their stride at halftime. And then another thing I noticed is Milton's deep ball is just not the greatest, so the secondary is just kind of all over the receivers. And Graham Mertz, the quarterback, I really praised him in his first start against Illinois, but it was kind of a little pedestrian. Maybe he got a little, hopefully this game, and then him getting COVID kind of humbled him a little bit. So I can see him still progressing as a quarterback. It's just this game wasn't it for him. Another quarterback that came in for Michigan was Cade McNamara. Joe Milton got benched after those 2 interceptions, and he came in pretty good. Cade threw 3 for 3 in a TD right when he came off the bench. It was really cool just to see them kind of catch their stride a little bit. Maybe he'd be a benefactor later in the season. Then I watched the Oregon versus Washington State game. Oregon won 43-29. Tyler Show, the quarterback, had 4 TDs for Oregon. The running back for Oregon, C.J. Verdell, had 1 TD and 118 yards, which is 6.6 per carry. Then for Washington State, Jaden Delores threw 2 TDs, 321 yards, and Deion McIntosh had 1 TD and 92 rushing yards. Washington State is in a really interesting situation. For the first time ever, they started a true freshman. And he didn't do too bad. Oregon looked kind of overwhelmed in the first half, and I was kind of worried for them. However, Tyler Schroe really picked it up in the last half. Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, he had 4 total TDs, and Washington State normally is weaker on the defensive side because they're more of a spread offense that's designed to pick up big yards and not worry so much about defense. And it doesn't really help them that Oregon has the best O-line in the conference, and it made Verdell, the running back, just look really smooth out there. So my predictions for Oregon and Washington State later in the season is Oregon's probably going to be the number 1 Pac-12 team. Maybe USC will take that spot, but who knows? It's still pretty early in their season. I also watched the Miami at Virginia Tech game. Miami won 25-24, so really close game. Derek King, the quarterback, threw 1 TD to 255 yards. Cameron Harris, the running back, had 1 TD, 63 rushing yards. And then for Virginia Tech, quarterback Hendon Hooker had 1 interception, 202 yards, but he had 1 rush TD to 59 rushing yards. So he led in passing and rushing. The Virginia Tech's defense kind of stepped into the challenge, especially on Miami's run game. They were containing Derek King. He just could not make any moves with his legs, but he still played pretty conservatively. He avoided the turnover. And at the end of the game, it came down to Virginia Tech to the final play, but they just couldn't make the conversion to win the game. Another reason why it was such a close game was that Miami had lots of penalties, 8 total penalties, and that's going to hurt the overall game. So they got lucky in their part. The interception they caught definitely kept them in the game too. Just some other games I watched, nothing too drastic or won't go too deep into it. Watched the Indiana at Michigan State. Indiana won. Michigan State has been a very big disappointment. They had more than 5 penalties and they could not even capitalize on the turnovers they had. Indiana's looking pretty hot. Their quarterback, Penix, he threw some gamble passes, but I'm sure he'll be good. It definitely helps that he has Ty Frogel. Ty had 200-plus yards in that game, along with 2 TDs, so good for him. So you'll watch out for him, actually. I watched the Iowa-Minnesota game. Iowa won. Iowa pass defense was dominant. I think they listened to me, and they ran the ball a lot more. They took it out of the quarterback's hands, just gave it to the run game. That's what they're best at. Disappointing performance from Minnesota's Tanner Morgan, but Rashad Bateman, who is a top prospect in the draft, he was pretty dope, though. He got a lot of good catches. I watched the Notre Dame at Boston College game. Notre Dame won. Boston came in pretty hot in the first quarter, containing them pretty well, but lots of fumbles in the second half. Ian Brook, the quarterback for Notre Dame, he's a limited quarterback. He played as a great college quarterback that night, and Notre Dame definitely capitalized on the turnovers they got from Boston College. Let's see. Lastly, I watched the Arkansas at Florida game. Florida won, and they're in contention to be a playoff team contender. Kyle Trask, the quarterback for Florida, who I really like, I think he's definitely in the Heisman conversation. He threw 5 passing TDs in the first half alone. And just to put in perspective on how well he's doing this season, through the first 6 weeks of the 2019 season, Joe Burrow, the Heisman winner, threw 25 touchdowns, which is great. But for 2020, through the first 6 weeks, Kyle Trask from Florida, he threw 27. He's thrown 27 so far. So just look in comparison. If Kyle Trask can keep up with his performance as he's doing in the first half of this season to the rest of the season, he has a pretty good chance of winning the Heisman if he's putting up big numbers, that may be even bigger numbers than Joe Burrow did last season. So Florida is definitely a team to watch out for, and I'm excited to see what Kyle Trask can do. Okay, let's kind of take a quick break. I'm glad I got over the college football and a little bit of the Queen's Gambit. So next half, I'll actually be interviewing a good friend of mine. We'll be talking about the NFL games that we saw this weekend and a little bit about Joe Burrow, as I mentioned, since he is now the rookie quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals. So take a break, and we'll get back to you. All right, guys, we're back on the show. As you can see, I moved away from my desk, and I am here with my good buddy Trevor. For some of those who don't know who Trevor is, me and him went to Iowa State together. We lived in the dorms, had a little bit of fun there, but not too much fun. Actually, just we had a lot of fun. Me and Trevor reconnected again after college. We found out we lived in the same area, and we've been best buds since then. So, Trevor, how's it going?
It's going great. Can't complain.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's been a while.
Coming off a nice Bengals loss, so life is as it should be. So.
Oh yeah, for some of you who don't know, Trevor is one of the only Bengals fans I know, and very interesting one too. And he'll definitely get into deep dives on Joe Burrow and some games that we watched this week. Before we get into the deep dive games, I just kind of go over some quick overview games that I saw. Starting with the Texans-Browns game, the Browns beat the Texans 7-10. Close game between the two. A lot of it had to do with the thunderstorm with the windy conditions. The Cardinals beat the Bills. As some of you may know, Cardinals beat the Bills in a really fashionable way. Kyler Murray had a Hail Mary touchdown to D-Hop. I also watched the Rams game against the Seattle Seahawks. Russ had a bad game, but that's okay. He's got plenty of opportunities to make his case for an MVP. And then I watched the Packers game. The Packers beat the Jacksonville Jaguars, and rookie quarterback Jake Luton had a pretty decent start against the Packers. I mean, Packers are not an easy team to start against. But their defense had a good run on Aaron Jones, the running back for the Packers. Packers need to have a couple more adjustments, but I'm glad to see what's going to happen more for both teams. So let's kind of get rolling through the three games that we want to talk about, starting with the Colts at the Titans game. So I'll kind of start things off my first thoughts. It's very obvious to me watching that game that Titans kind of have a couple defensive things to work on, especially on special teams. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can recall a block kick for a scoop and score.
Yep.
But I like Ryan Tannehill as a quarterback, man. He's just like a very likable dude, just because he had that ACL injury, and then he kind of come back for redemption, leaving Miami, and then being a great fit for the Titans.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what are kind of some thoughts you noticed from that game?
I mean, yeah, like you said, Tannehill's a good quarterback, and really, the Colts, they know how to come back in games. As you saw, they were down, I think, 2 scores going into halftime, and as a Bengals fan, I know being up 21-0 in the first half against them didn't hold up, and they're a really good team, and I think that division is going to come obviously down to those two teams, with the Texans and the Jags being pretty much irrelevant. But the Titans are kind of a frustrating team to understand, because I mean, you look back and week 2 they only beat Jacksonville by 3 points, and then they played Buffalo in week 4 and I think beat them by 2 or 3 scores, and then they lose to the Bengals. So it's like you don't really know what team you're going to get week in and week out. And,
right.
It must be frustrating as a Titans fan, but I know Mike Vrabel's a good coach, but the way it's trending is it looks like it might be Indy's division, but we'll see if the Titans can get together with Derek Henry and everybody.
And I really liked this matchup. It was kind of like a match of who was going to take over the division.
Right.
And I kind of jumped to Phillip Rivers. I mean, people joke that he's like old man Rivers. Mm-hmm. He's kind of, not overrated, but he's just never made that next step. I mean, I don't believe he's never been to a Super Bowl for starters. Right. And you have his counterparts like Big Ben and Eli Manning, where they've at least won one Super Bowl. And I don't know, I'll give Phillip Rivers a pat on the back. He had a pretty decent game. I mean, he had no picks, 300-plus yards, and a TD. And, yeah, I mean, Phillip Rivers he's always just been a good quarterback. But one thing that stuck out to me is I noticed this game is, have you ever seen him throw the football?
He's got a funky three-quarters.
I can't even mimic. I can't even make fun because I can't actually do the throw.
Yeah. It's definitely a little off-putting, and, it varies time to time, but – and that's the thing with Phillip Rivers and kind of how he was in San Diego or L.A. now, is that, even the Colts offense is so, you don't know where you're going to get the points from. You don't know where, whether you're going to get a running attack or which running back it's going to be. This week it was Nyheim Hines, and I had him benched in fantasy, and I think he had 21.5 or something like that. So it's one of those teams, like you look back at the proverbial, New England Patriots running backs or the Denver Broncos running backs who, fantasy or not, you just don't know what you're going to get week in and week out. So.
Yeah, they kind of have that 3-way running back system that's very popular in the New England Patriots. You mentioned, because one running back I've been following closely since college was Wisconsin's Jonathan Taylor. I mean, I loved him in college, and honestly, I don't know if it's maybe he's not in the right system, but I just haven't seen much from this season, because I even tried to pick one in fantasy. I almost begged this guy on my league, please give me Jonathan Taylor. I'll give you anything.
Oh,
I'm glad I didn't fall through with that.
No, I tried getting him a couple of times, and he ended up going. I had a lot of late picks to where there was a lot of picks in between, and like I said, I mean, I picked up Nyheim Hines about a month ago, and he's either going to get you 5 points or 20, and you can't really depend on that because that's just how their offense is, but. They definitely, like you said, it was a matchup between two of the teams that was kind of going to determine how the AFC South is going to go from here, and it looks like the Colts are in the driver's seat. But Still plenty of time left.
Yeah, and another shout out to Michael Pittman Jr. had a pretty good game as a
Yeah,
receiver.
He did. USC.
Yeah, I mean, let's kind of jump through to the Chargers at Dolphins game. I was real excited for this game because it's against two first-round rookies. Tua, I always mispronounce his name. Tua Tagovailoa.
Yeah.
Tua Tagovailoa. Viola, that's right. Yeah, Viola.
I know. I used to practice it when I thought the Bengals were going to pick him, but then Burrow came out of nowhere, so I kind of think I lost it. But
right.
Tagovailoa.
Tagovailoa.
Yeah.
Tagovailoa. It's Tua Tagovailoa. I will remember this, and I will say it right from now on.
We'll forget it next
But yes, Tua versus Justin Herbert, who was the third quarterback pick. He got selected by the Chargers. Tua got selected by the Dolphins. And, like, look at the first half. It was a pretty even matchup, not just between the two quarterbacks, but just the teams in general. Especially on defense, but Chargers were just a little bit on the defensive edge before halftime, and like last half, Tua turned up. I mean, he was just getting better and better each game I've seen him play.
And I don't want to say that he's a game manager because that's not putting enough respect on his name. He's way more than that. But the way that the Dolphins are, I mean, they've got great corners and Byron Jones and who's the other guy, Xavier Howard. They lock down the receivers. They send different blitzes. They force turnovers. I think they have a turnover force in 16 straight games, which is obviously the highest streak in the NFL right now. Which, I mean, you don't have to be, Joe Burrow. We'll get to this later, but Joe Burrow's had to, overcome a terrible defense, a terrible offensive line, whatever the week is, it's something different every time. But, if you've got a defense like the Dolphins do and Tua can, just, you don't have to be a game manager per se, but just, don't limit the mistakes. And, if your defense is going to force mistakes on the other end, then, that's a pretty good recipe. And what are they, 6-3 now? I mean, Dolphins they're legit. And
yeah, it's very true. And it's just one thing I noticed is like Browns are kind of the same record. I think it's so weird to think that like 3 years ago Browns weren't even a thought in anyone's mind.
And the Bengals are 2-6-1 so that's at least
that's
some
better,
normalcy.
That's better in comparison to last year, isn't it? In the same weeks,
we have the same amount of wins.
I mean, you never know. I mean, I've seen improvements from all those teams, and and like kind of get back to the Chargers Dolphins game is like one thing I like about the Dolphins with Tua is that like it's almost like the Dolphins have always almost been there. I mean, if you look at like recent games before Tua, like it was always like a close like one drive game or one touchdown game away from winning. It was almost they just need that little extra hump, and I'm starting to finally see that. And Justin Herbert, I mean, I like Justin Herbert, and fortunately he had that pick, and he just can't make mistakes like that, especially close moments like this game. But I'm excited to see both these quarterbacks kind of progress throughout this season and in the future because Burrow, Herbert, Tua, Kyler Murray, and much more. They're the future of the NFL,
Allen,
no doubt about it. I mean, quarterbacks are becoming a lot better over the years,
for sure.
Especially in efficiency. Like they have various styles that they minimize turnovers. And they try to, they have higher QBRs compared to like the previous generations, such as like the Phillip Rivers, Big Bens, and Eli Mannings, because those guys just do picks left and right, and it wasn't a big deal.
The league's in good hands for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, seeing the top three quarterbacks all do well in their own, perspectives it's definitely good to see because, it's always good because you see Ben's still, cooking along, but Eli's retired and Rivers is definitely on his last leg, so. It's good to see that these, and Tom Brady's just outlasting everybody, but it's good to see a new wave of these quarterbacks like, and Russ is obviously kind of in between there, but he's, Russ is always going to be Russ. He's, year in, year out, but
exactly.
It's good to see.
Now let's get to the juicy stuff. I know Trevor's been waiting for this. Let's talk about the Bengals at Steelers game. I'm sure this is kind of he's excited to talk about it, but at the same time he's probably a little bummed to talk about it. So as you know, the Steelers beat the Bengals on Sunday night, and kind of my thoughts that I saw was a lot of drop passes in the first half, but I do give the Bengals credit for containing James Conner on the run game. But yeah, it's just unfair because Big Ben has such an arsenal of receivers, and that's kind of been their thing because you had Antonio Brown for a while, you had Le'Veon Bell, who was the running back. But either way, Big Ben just had a much more experienced receivers compared to the Bengals and Joe Burrow. But let me hear your thoughts on the game.
Well, I mean, so it's, like you said, they have the weapons, and we have had so many injuries and so many, we were down 4 coaches due to COVID protocols. And, this isn't a prelude to, make excuses, but this was one thing that worried me, leading up to the game was that, we were down to, at the beginning of the year, we had a number 7 cornerback on our practice squad. He was in the game getting significant time both in the slot and on the outside. And, you look at a lineup of receivers like Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, even Eric Ebron had a couple big catches. I mean, you're already underwhelmingly or overwhelmingly outmatched there.
Right.
And that really wasn't the deciding factor in the game. I mean, the score 36-10 looks like the Steelers won it handedly, and they did. And it was actually, if you look at the game from the 3 phases, I really think the score could have been a lot worse, especially if you break down that first quarter. I mean, we had 2 fumbles, a fumble on the return by Alex Erickson, a fumble on a first down catch that was actually a momentum killer and a drive killer by T. Higgins.
Right.
And I think out of those 2 turnovers, they ended up with 3 points.
Right.
The Steelers had 6 possessions offensively in the first quarter, which usually in an NFL game you're looking at 9, 10, 11 offensive possessions. They had 6 in the first quarter.
Right.
And the defense did hold them to, I want to say it was 12 points before, because I don't think they started scoring into the second. But you're asking your defense to do too much, and we were 0 for 13 on third downs, which I haven't looked into the stats, but I can guarantee you there are not that many teams, if any at all, who've ever gone 0 for on third down and won a game.
Right.
I mean, and even Joe Burrow, he looked off. I mean, it was windy, super windy to start the game, first quarter. Ben didn't have an issue with it. Speaks to his experience and probably being familiar with, Heinz Field.
Yeah.
But, Burrow started off 1 for 5. They had a bunch of 3 and outs. I mean, he didn't look sharp, and he started to pick it up in the second quarter, but then he got that hit by Bud Dupree that was maybe a late hit, but it wasn't too bad, and he kind of toppled into the bench there on the sidelines, and he came out in the second half, and
right.
He just looked off. I mean, I think it was I would say his worst game that he's played in, at least on his end, because he had a really bad game against the Ravens earlier in the year, but they were hitting him hard.
Right, that's the thing. Ravens are known to be a top 5 defense in the league, and it's no doubt that Steelers are top 5. I could argue maybe top 3. I mean, they're just defensively solid, and you can't be too hard on Burrow if you're a fan or not, just because it's hard to go against teams that are that experienced and that well conditioned.
Yeah.
And I mean, Burrow obviously had an off day, but here's the thing I noticed about Burrow is that he doesn't make the same mistakes twice. No. He is he plays like he's a second year. That's what it looks like to me.
If not more, yeah. He's
right.
And that's one thing that, we'll get to it a little bit too, but I don't know if anybody, I'm sure at that point most people were tuned out of that game, but it was kind of controversial that they left him in at the end of the game down, 36-10, and they had asked Joe Burrow after the game if he had any conversations with the head coach Zach Taylor, and he goes, nope, never came up. He goes, I'm not a quitter, and it's as a fan of a team with a bad offensive line and a future franchise quarterback, you would kind of like to see him come out in that situation, but it sounds like he that was never on the table. He wanted to finish what he started, and
right.
It's a little scary for a fan and for, I'm sure, the team and organization in general. But
right.
I think that we'll get to this, but his attitude and his personality, I think, rubs off on his team. Which
right. And I definitely want to get more into the more traits of Joe Burrow that I see on the field and off the field. So let's kind of take a quick break, just because my camera's really shitty and it's probably going to die any minute. Just kind of, just quick break, and then we'll get talking about what we're seeing in Joe Burrow's rookie career and what we're going to see in the future. So stick around, guys, and we'll have some more. All right, me and Trevor took a break. We got a fresh set of beer. So we watched a little bit of the Bears game and Vikings game that's going on right now. Right now, the Vikings are beating the Bears, so we'll see what happens later. So Yeah, I mentioned that Trevor's a big Bengals fan. As you can see, he has all the homework. He knows everything and everything, man. I'm a little nervous to go against him on some Bengals content because he has that upper hand on me. But what's kind of tough with the main headline of the Bengals, which is the rookie quarterback Joe Burrow. So, kind of like beginning of the season, right at draft night, Bengals with the number one pick select Joe Burrow, and then that moment all the way to right after Week 10 in NFL. Is he meeting the expectations? Is he not? Is he above? Give me your thoughts on that.
So I really think that, to say that he hasn't met expectations would be, just wrong. He's had the second most pass attempts in the NFL, and for anybody, especially somebody behind that offensive line, I mean, that's just a lot to ask for somebody. I think week 2 he had 61 pass attempts against the Browns. They've asked him to do a lot, and more times than not, he's answered the bell. And everybody had high expectations for him. And for me, like if I had to grade it based on how well he's met my expectations, I'd probably put it like a B, because I think that for him to be an A would be exceeding my already high expectations.
Do you think there is an A prospect that you've seen from like a quarterback standpoint in the draft ever?
I guess it's, and that's kind of the hard part of the question, is that I'm not saying he's not an A prospect, but that in terms of my expectations and I think league expectations, has he met them? I think he's done a B job in where he's even been above average in those expectations.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can see how quickly he's made an impact on the Bengals organization in general. And we'll get into this a little bit later when we talk about some of his traits. But he's that guy. I mean, you look at guys in the league and you see that and he's been nothing short of great, and in terms of how you can expect, a rookie being thrown into a 2-14 team with a bad offensive line that's only gotten worse throughout the season based on, I mean, we had a guy start at right tackle against the Steelers who's played 9 snaps as a tackle, and last week he joined the team, Quentin Spain, and 36 hours later he was starting because we had so many injuries.
Right.
I mean, he's had his bad games. He's missed some throws. He's, held on to the ball too long. But, I mean, you look at, it's not really even his stat line because his stats are good, but they're not, they're not Justin Herbert's, and we'll get to that.
Right.
But you can't look at what this guy does on and off the field and say that he hasn't at least met expectations, if not exceeded them in some ways.
And, kind of like my expectations, when he got drafted, right off the bat, I knew he was going to struggle. I never questioned his talent, his work ethic especially. But one thing I noticed when he plays is, like I mentioned earlier, he doesn't make the same mistake twice.
Nope.
He learns very fast. And as I mentioned, he plays like he's a second-year quarterback. And honestly, as you mentioned, he's top 3 in total pass attempts. And that kind of just tells me right there that the team, the head coach especially, trusts him with the ball. And
100%.
they should give him the ball. I mean, I don't have a problem with him having that many attempts. He's top 5 in overall attempts thrown, and that's a good. I think that's a good thing because that kind of minimizes the stun to his growth.
Yep.
If he's getting that hard hits, those bad throws now and more and ever, he's gonna learn quick. Because I mentioned he's a fast learner.
Yeah.
So if he gets more passing attempts, he's gonna progress just as quickly. And as you mentioned, the O-line, it's hard to work with that O-line. I mean, he's top 3 in overall sacks among starting quarterbacks. And that's next to Carson Wentz and I think Russell Wilson.
Yep.
And being a rookie that's taking that many hits, I prefer not for him to get that many hits just because I want to make sure that his career stays on track. But still, he's learning to avoid those situations with what he has.
Right.
And that's why I think he's kind of playing above the expectations. He's working. Great quarterbacks can make the best of what they have. Yep. And I think he's on the path to do that.
Right.
So I like how what he's doing so far, and kind of thinking from more what he's doing for the team. Right. Do you think that he's elevating the team in a certain way? It could be kind of like something on the field or off the field.
Yeah. So, I mean, like you said, he's making the best of what he's got, which, with the Bengals, both as a team right now is currently constructed and as an organization, which, anybody who's watched the Bengals in the past, I mean, I've been a fan since '05 with Carson Palmer and Chad Johnson, TJ Houshmandzadeh, Rudy
I like
Johnson.
Carson Palmer.
Like I've seen it all, and I've seen them, have a team with, Andy Dalton, like in 2015, where they started off 8-0. And sometimes I think, man, maybe what if you put like a first or second year Joe Burrow on that team where they ended up losing in heartbreaking fashion to the Pittsburgh Steelers? If anybody remembers a Jeremy Hill fumble, late hit or an illegal hit on Antonio Brown by Vontaze Burfict, we had a lead with 1 minute 30 seconds left. I mean, Andy Dalton is a great person and a very average quarterback. If you put a team around him that can support him, he will, turn out. Joe Burrow is the kind of guy who's going to take things that are worse than him and lift them up. And I think you're seeing that now. Like, the record may not show it, but if you look at, if you take out the last Steelers game and the Ravens game, we've been in every single game that we've played in. And whether it's special teams or defense or, somebody on the offense besides Joe Burrow, they're the ones that have been, I don't want to say losing it because you can never put it on one person or one play, but, Joe Burrow's kept him in almost every single game, and he is the epitome of a guy who's going to make the players around him better. And again, I don't mean to bring up Andy Dalton because great guy, was awesome for the Bengals. We went to the playoffs 5 straight years, didn't win a game, but arguably the most, or not arguably, inarguably the most successful they've been since the 80s when they went to the Super Bowl twice. And that's our franchise. The 90s were terrible, and 2000s we had some spurts with Carson Palmer, but he's just a guy who, you said on and off the field, I mean, he was named a captain as a rookie coming off a short, so this team didn't even get to see him in the preseason. They didn't get to have, live workouts with him until this, limited training camp, which was, 2 weeks long, 3 weeks long. Yeah. He made an impact on them. And they had the whole situation with Jacob Blake and Kenosha. He actually was chosen by the team to give a little speech, and I apologize, I forget who started it off. Maybe it was DJ Reader, but they elected him to speak on social equality, in speaking out about all the current stuff going on in the system. And this is a rookie. This is a white guy from Ohio. But that just shows that they bought into Joe Burrow right away.
I think that a lot has to do with the fact that he's from, he wasn't born in Ohio, but he grew up in Ohio.
Do you know where he grew up?
Ball. He was born in Ames, Iowa.
Yep. You know why?
Iowa State Cyclones.
Yep.
Because his dad was a coordinator, I believe, for the Cyclones. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you put the nail on the bat. I mean, he just has very leadership qualities, and kind of like my thought on how he's in the team from a statistical standpoint. Tyler Boyd, he went from top 25 as a receiver in yards to now top 20 year over year within the same time period. Right. So he's obviously getting these guys some more reps and more yards. And T. Higgins, I really like T. Higgins. Right. He's on my fantasy team, and I just won this week too. Thank you, T. Higgins, for all those yards and TDs. I will start you again next week. Just please do the same thing again. But T. Higgins, he's from Clemson, and I knew he was going to be a good receiver, but I didn't expect him to be this great. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that he has a good chemistry with Joe Burrow, because T. Higgins is a top target for Joe Burrow, because he's top. I think he's third among the rookies in receiving yards. Yep. So, and I wasn't expecting that going into this draft. So I like how Joe Burrow's given these guys the reps and the receptions and kind of, showing that leadership qualities. Right. So yeah, let's kind of go deep dive into more of his best traits. And I'll start off. I like how offensively balanced he is. Yeah. You can trust him with the pass game, and you may think like he's a white guy. He's not like Lamar Jackson where he can just run the ball wherever he pleases. Yeah. But he knows
sneakily athletic.
Sneakily athletic. He's not no Christian McCaffrey. But Joe Burrow knows the right moment when to run it, and that's what I like about him. And my favorite part when he's on the field is pocket awareness. He is so aware of what's going on around him. He doesn't flinch like some rookie quarterbacks that I've seen. And when the pressure's hot, especially on that O-line, yeah, he just doesn't flinch. He makes the right adjustments, moves away from the pocket if he needs to,
Right.
scrambles to extend the play, and just follows through with the throw. And with that throw, he just has year over year comparing to the year before his Heisman year. So his first year at LSU versus his second year as a Heisman, his throwing mechanics are just completely a whole different person.
Yep.
And the same thing applies as an NFL quarterback. They're just so fundamentally perfect that it just translates so well in NFL, and he's just so focused on that too. And as I mentioned, I like his work ethic. He had that huge LSU run with the Tigers, and it's just a huge difference in how he was that first year versus his last year. And my understanding during the offseason, he was just so eager, and it definitely helped that LSU had a very great offensive coordinator. And as you can tell, because he's gone now, and LSU's just been to
Brady? Some Brady?
I think it was Dave Arana.
Okay.
But Dave Arana's no longer LSU,
Okay.
and it shows because LSU is not nowhere near as they were.
Right.
But even during the offseason with the Bengals, I recall hearing stories of there was playbook sessions, and he was so eager to get to the next part of the playbook, and the coaches had to, hey, slow down. We're not at that part yet.
Right.
We'll get to it. And I thought that was just such a neat little small. It's never in the media.
Right.
But it was, but it wasn't a big topic. But it's just
Unless
little
you're
small
a Bengals
thing.
fan.
Right. It's just a small
Yeah.
little thing that shows that he's so eager to learn and try to help the team. So that's like one of these traits that we like.
Right.
On the field, he's so fundamentally sound. Off the field, he has a mind focus, and he's all about the work ethic.
Yeah, no, like you said, I mean, you talk about his pocket awareness. I mean, you saw, what was it, a couple weeks ago, and I tried to pull up this highlight, and I couldn't find it, but it was, I believe, against the Browns, where he dropped back, rolled out, and almost got sacked, I think, 2 or 3 times, scrambled back, cut back, missed another tackle, and it only turned out to be like a 6-yard gain. But it easily could have been a loss of 8 yards on a sack, and he kind of, and I hate making this comparison, and it's not exactly apples to orange or apples to apples, but, Ben Roethlisberger, just how he feels the pressure, and he's not blazing fast like Lamar Jackson. He's quick, he's good, but just making people miss, anticipating. He even got lit up. He tried to spin move out like week 2 or 3 and got lit up because he was adjusting to the NFL game. But
one thing to mention is like his scramble tactics. It's kind of reminds me of vintage Aaron Rodgers a little bit.
Yeah.
It's just all about efficient running. It's not he's just running I'm going to scramble and then just go for it. I'm going to scramble to extend the play.
Everything is calculated, and he's not scrambling to take off running. Like he will if he needs to, but he's still going to stay behind the line of scrimmage as long as he can and look downfield as long as he can. But kind of what you said about him having a veteran presence with that is that if you go back to week 1 and you see his first touchdown, because he didn't get his first passing touchdown until week 2 against the Browns, he had that 23-yard. He audibled into a QB draw, and if you watch, he gets a lead block, but then he kind of waits behind his lead blocker about 8 yards past the line of scrimmage, waits behind them, lets them get the block, and then he takes off to the end zone.
He anticipated it.
He anticipated it, and he showed patience, which rookies don't usually do that, let alone in their first start for their first touchdown. Like there's not a ton of things that can be said to criticize his pocket presence. And
right. And you mentioned rookies usually don't do that. When I think of rookies, I think they're either two things in that sort of situation, especially in week 2. They're either really gun shy, they're hesitant to do it, or 2, they're a quick trigger. They just do without thinking about the precautions of it.
Happy feet.
They're happy feet, exactly.
Right. But yeah, I mean, just to talk about, briefly talk about some of the traits that, everybody kind of sees with Burrow, but, we've kind of talked about his leadership, and we just did touch on his veteran presence, but, he was elected a captain as a rookie in a shortened, in a COVID-affected season. I mean, that just shows that, to be elected as a captain in a player vote, that short into a expedited off season. I mean, that just shows that as soon as he walked in, he was the guy.
Exactly.
And you're talking about, like in any locker room, you're talking about guys who are from all walks of life. You're talking about guys that have, been, from big programs, small programs. They've been with the Bengals for a long time. They've, just joined the Bengals. They voted for him to, become this captain because they, A, believe in him, and B, know that he's a genuine guy.
Right.
Which, off the field, I think you can see. I mean, he's into SpongeBob. Like he had a quote the other day where he was too scared to watch shows like House as a kid or anything like that, so he stuck to SpongeBob.
Right.
And he's a likable guy, and
Right.
it doesn't seem forced. It doesn't and I'm not going to throw Baker Mayfield under the bus.
I was just thinking of that actually.
But it just you don't think that. Like a guy like Baker Mayfield sometimes would say things and be like, he knows what to say. And not just him. I mean, it's easy for anybody to get in front of the camera and say, hey, say the right thing.
Right.
But with Joe Burrow, it just seems, genuine. And,
right.
Again, I'm kind of rolling all these up into one. But, after their first win against the Jacksonville Jaguars, he tweets maybe once a month.
Yeah. Twice
a month. So all he tweeted was, winning is fun.
Yeah, I did see that one.
And
right.
One more. So there was one when they had their second win against the Titans. He put up a picture on Instagram of one of the corners missing a tackle on his scramble, and he just said social distancing.
Oh yeah.
Just he's a little snarky. He's got kind of a glimmer in his eye. He's a guy that you'd want to get a beer with or want to just chill out with. He seems legitimate.
Yeah, I do like. Yeah, he's real self-aware of himself, but he's still confident. And quarterbacks, they're all confident in themselves. I've seen cocky quarterbacks. I've seen just confident quarterbacks, and he's one of them. Yeah. So yeah, as you can tell, I mean, we have a lot to talk about Joe Burrow, but I want to dive into something about the Offensive Rookie of the Year award. So we're going to take a quick break, and me and Trevor are going to discuss who should be the true candidate for Rookie of the Year. I'll give you a hint. Our opinions might be a little different, so let's stay tuned. Cheers, man.
Cheers.
It's good to see you. We don't hang out very often. We get
we do, but
we get
not
very
often
busy.
enough.
That's the problem.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So as I mentioned, me and Trevor, we talk about who should be the true winner of the Offensive Rookie of the Year. So as guests, tell me your thoughts. Who should win Offensive Rookie of the Year?
Well, I would like to say Joe Burrow because he is my favorite quarterback of the rookie crew. And I also have a nice futures bet on him for winning Rookie of the Year, so that would also help out to net me a nice little profit. But I think that you have to look at his situation, look at the organization that he's in. I know that the Chargers aren't, historically a super successful franchise. They've had their faults. We kind of touched on that earlier. But I think just Joe Burrow getting he had the keys to the whole team from week one. Really what he's had to go through with the offensive line and the defensive issues they've had. And, I mean, you look at Geno Atkins was basically out. They've had, so much that he's had to overcome, and he's kept them in every game.
Yeah.
Speaking to that, though, I also know that Justin Herbert is replacing Phillip Rivers, who, by all accounts, is, a San Diego / LA Chargers legend. I mean, I've grown up with knowing one quarterback for the Chargers, and Herbert's been good. I mean, he's been great. His numbers have been great. He's limited turnovers. He's made some amazing passes, runs too. I mean, they're both comparable in a lot of statistical categories if Justin Herbert doesn't get the nod. But I think what he's meant to the team, and this is kind of one of those, you look at any sport with the MVP, award. It's not what the numbers say, it's what you've meant to the team.
Right.
And I think that Joey Burrow has been more to the Bengals than Justin Herbert's been to the Chargers. But that being said, Justin Herbert's been phenomenal.
Yeah.
And, we talked about this earlier. All three quarterbacks that were taken first, between Joey, Tua, and Justin, they've all been awesome.
And don't forget Jordan Love.
Oh yeah, he's been really good at. He's been lighting the fire under Aaron Rodgers' ass. So he's
doing great at practice.
Yeah, it's So I think that the rest of the year, the way it goes, is going to be, it's going to be close. Right now, I think if the season ends today, I think Justin Herbert would be the Rookie of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year, and I wouldn't have any problem with it. But I think there's still plenty of time left. The Bengals face kind of a soft schedule. We still play the Cowboys, we still play the Giants, and we still play the Redskins, which the Redskins do have a good defensive team. But I think there's still time for Burrow to come back. And you know what? He's seen the Ravens once, and he's seen the Steelers once, and they've kind of given him a rough introduction to the league. And, I think that if he can adjust and kind of, get himself acclimated, get his offensive line healthy where they're not starting guards at tackles. And, they started Hakeem Adeniji, who was a 6th-round pick out of Kansas. They started him at left tackle last weekend. First of all, 6th-round pick should not be starting at left tackle, let alone from Kansas, a historically great football school, as we know.
Yeah.
So I do have hope that Burrow can turn it around, but I think as of right now, I think Herbert statistically got it, but you make the case, you tell me why Herbert's got it locked down already.
I didn't say Herbert, but you spoke for me. I feel like this is like undisputed with Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp. We got Skip over here, I'm Shannon, and I was going to say, Skip, why you do that? Yeah, you hit in the nail, man. I'm going to go with Justin Herbert in this case. I'll admit, I have my doubts of Herbert. I thought he was the most flawed quarterback coming into this draft, very unpolished. But he's kind of stepped up, and especially in Tyrod Taylor, having a punctured lung, that was crazy.
Yeah.
But Herbert, I don't think he's part of that reason why that happened. I'm just going to assume he isn't. But I'm just liking Herbert at the moment. I had a like Mr. Hyde, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of feel for him, but he kind of steps up, just kind of from a statistical standpoint, because with my job, I'm Mr. Numbers kind of guy, and that kind of translate through me with my podcast is like, even with Herbert being a game behind because he had a bye week before Burrow, he had a higher completion,
and he didn't start till week 2, or yeah.
All right, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Higher completion and only 100 yards with 60 less attempts before week 10. And then looking at the yards per attempt, which I like to use those kind of statistical categories because it's more of a overall game category. Burrow had 6.8 yards per attempt before week 10, I'll admit. But Herbert had 8 yards per attempt. And just from like a more higher level statistical category, Herbert has the higher passer rating and the QBR rating, which is a very top-level quarterback stat.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, I praise Joe Burrow. He has stepped up from an O-line that doesn't give him much, and just an offensive scheme that just makes it difficult for him at times.
Yeah.
But I just kind of see a little bit more tight window throws from Herbert versus Burrow, and explosive-wise.
Okay. Yeah.
Herbert actually has more 20-plussers and 40-plusser yards than Joe Burrow.
Okay.
And I think I'll say Burrow is better decision-making, but Herbert is more gunslinger and willing to make the big plays.
Right.
That will definitely get the more yards.
Yep. And
you may make the argument like maybe Burrow has more wins than Herbert down the line. But just remember, Kyler Murray won Offensive Rookie of the Year with the Cardinals, and he was last in division. So I think I don't want to put wins into the equation because, honestly, both teams aren't the best in their division. But just kind of looking from a statistical standpoint, I like Herbert a little bit more. I personally like Burrow because he has that work ethic. He puts everything into his game, but Herbert is just playing a little bit more better.
He is, and and I think you just kind of have to look at the quarterbacks as they are. I mean, you look at a guy like Josh Allen. I mean,
I love Josh Allen.
yep. Oh, I do too. And and that's something that when I was looking at mock drafts and all that, like, Joe Burrow was obviously the right pick, but he wasn't necessarily the sexy pick, if you want to say that, because guys like Justin Herbert and Josh Allen, I mean, 6'6", more athletic, bigger arm, like, and that's something that Herbert's capitalized on. I mean, he's been great. I'm not going to argue that. I mean, I just think they're different quarterbacks, and like I know from the first, what was it, the first like 6 weeks, like I think Joe Burrow did not have. Oh man, I'm gonna bury myself into a hole here. But anyway, his passes over 20 yards were terrible. I think he might have had one completion, but he was also the second most effective quarterback from 10 to 19 yards, which just kind of shows you the discrepancy of styles. He's not going to run farther, faster than Justin Herbert, or I don't want to keep bringing up Josh Allen, but and he's not going to throw the ball 60 yards downfield. But Joe Burrow has turned it up, and he even had one with T. Higgins like this, yesterday. It's not necessarily his game, but once he gets a little more comfortable with his receivers, I mean, but you're comparing different kinds of quarterbacks, though. And I mean, you're going to have the games where, Justin Herbert's going to rush for 80 yards and throw for 350, and then you're going to have ones where he has a couple picks, and, Joe Burrow hasn't thrown a multi-pick game yet this year. I mean, even though he was bad yesterday, he didn't throw a pick. He's not had more than one pick in a game, and I think, it's just different quarterbacks, so it's a little hard to compare, but you're right. As of right now, I think Justin Herbert's the offensive rookie of the year, and I'm hoping that, in the last 7 games that Joe Burrow can turn it around against a little softer competition and, make it a little more of an interesting race. So.
I want both rookies to succeed. It's a tough league out there, man, and no one takes rookies very lightly in the NFL. I'm not worried about Joe Burrow. I mean, coming in, I did worry just because where he was landing, but I see the progression, and I think he's in good hands. And if he just keeps doing his thing and kind of sticks it out, it's only going to get better from here, I think.
Yeah.
And it starts with a good quarterback. I mean, I mentioned that I like Carson Palmer, and unfortunately it didn't work out so well for him. Yeah. And I think Joe Burrow can kind of elevate the team a little bit better than Carson can. I'm sure you agree with me too.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, if Joe Burrow wins Offensive Rookie of the Year, I'll buy you a drink. And if Justin wins, want to buy me a drink?
Deal.
Okay.
Deal.
All right. I'll keep you updated on the loop of when this happens. Good stuff. I mean, I'm glad to come out here and meet up with you. I mean, it's real convenient that we're not too far away.
Yeah.
I mean, you're my second guest. My second guest, and real impressed with how well you kind of, you came prepared. I like that.
It's not easy to be a Bengals fan, so you gotta look at the camera, and you gotta be good, and you gotta be able to come because hey, like you said, it's Carson Palmer was a good quarterback, but he didn't have enough to bring them to the next level. But I think Joe Burrow, the quarterback in the NFL is one of the only sports where one guy can save a team from itself per se, and if there's any bad organizations in football, I mean, the Bengals are right there in the bottom 5, and, I think he can do it. I do. Yep. And I'm glad to see that they've been spending money in free agency and just put a claim on for Tack McKinley from the Falcons, which 5 years ago, they never would have done, giving a former first-round disgruntled pick, waiver priority and going for that. So, I'm hoping that they can stay aggressive and figure out what they need to do, and hopefully that they don't waste Joe Burrow's rookie window, because he's gonna be demanding a max contract, or I shouldn't say demanding, but he's gonna be worth a max contract in 4 years, I think, or
Right.
5 years, and hopefully it's with the Bengals. But you know, you got to take advantage while you can. So hopefully it's only up from here.
Yeah, great. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show. I'm glad to be here. Before I forget, have a great Thanksgiving. If I don't see you till then,
Too,
same
bro.
to the audience. And yeah,
Cheers.
yeah. So that's.
Cheers, everyone.
I mean, that's a wrap. I'll finish off with another recording of a formal ending to my show. But thanks again for coming, and we will get back to you guys in a bit. Yeah, as you can tell, I mean, I had a real great time having this little session with my buddy Trevor. He's a real good friend of mine. We've known each other for a long time, and always good to see him. And I'm glad I live so close to him too. Yep, that wraps up today's show. Before I wrap it up, I would like to make an announcement. I finally have a name for my podcast now. So before I tell you the name, I just kind of want to give you a narrative how I came to this name. So I mentioned about a month ago, I started my new job. And my field of expertise is digital marketing, and I went to one company, and then I went to another company. And the second company, I came in thinking I knew everything, that I was the best of what I do. But unfortunately, I struggled really hard because it was an environment and a field, a clientele that I just wasn't my best specialty in. And you know, I struggled, and unfortunately, I had to leave the company. That just didn't work for me, and it wasn't a good fit. And then I found this new company, and right off the bat, I just knew, like, I got my confidence back. I found my groove. I got my groove on how to do my job again, like the way that I want to and the way that I can succeed. And I worked hard, stayed late. I wanted to put a good impression on my bosses, my coworkers, my team members. Just want to let them know that I'm here for the long run and I want to make an impact. And as a result, I ended up winning Employee of the Month. And to be honest, I was really surprised. I was like, wow. I mean, 2 months ago, I was at my worst on my job, and now my peers voted for me for this award. It wasn't just like managers; it was like everybody puts their votes in for this award. I was like, yeah, I told them appreciate the support. Couldn't have done it without everyone's help and welcoming, their welcomings. And that's when I kind of thought, like, man, I want to be here for the long run. I want to keep doing. And in a way, this is kind of like my comeback story. And that's why this gave me the idea for this show. This show is a new chapter of my life that I want to build and exceed at, as I mentioned in the very first episode. So the name of my show will be called the Comeback Sports Podcast. So when I start my show, I'll say, hello, hello, hello. This is the Comeback Sports Podcast. And I'll say with pride, because that name means a lot to me, knowing that I finally I'm having a story that I feel I can stay true to. So I appreciate anyone that's still on this journey with me, and it's going to get bigger from here because I'm going to keep doing my thing. I have a lot of things that I have planned, and I know it's going to be fun, and I want to keep on building this. So that's today's episode. Appreciate the support. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share with a friend that may be interested in this content. So stick around, guys, and we'll have some more. See ya.